I was in the kitchen making coffee when Emma walked in, her expression tight and focused, like she was gearing up for a speech. She had this new energy about her since she got back from that personal growth workshop last weekend. Before that, she'd been laid back, never one to nitpick. But now, it was like she was seeing our whole marriage through a microscope. "Luke," she said, her voice clipped as she had the cereal bowl I'd left in the sink. "Do you think it's fair that I'm always cleaning up after you?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, sorry, I'll get it in a sec. Just needed my coffee first." She pressed her lips together, and for a moment, I thought she'd drop it. But instead, she took a deep breath, as if reciting from memory. "That's not the point. It's not about you getting it in a sec. It's about you expecting me to get it in a sec if you don't." I tilted my head, not sure I understood what she was getting at. "I don't expect." "You do," she cut in. "I learned something at the workshop. About unpaid labor. How women end up doing so much invisible work in marriages and it's never valued." She was serious. Her eyes locked on mine like she was trying to drill her new idea straight through me. I shifted, feeling a weird mix of confusion and amusement. "Emma, come on," I said lightly. "You're overthinking this. I'll take care of it." "No big deal." "It is a big deal, Look," she snapped. "You're not listening. Every time you leave dishes in the sink or clothes on the floor, you're telling me I'm here to pick up after you. Like it's my job." I took a sip of my coffee, trying to keep things calm. "I never said that. You know that. It's not what you say. It's what you do," she said firmly. "I've been reading about it. The way marriages can become these exploitative contracts where one person, usually the woman, ends up being the unpaid caretaker." I set my mug down and sighed. "Emma, you're my wife, not my maid. I'm not treating you like that." She crossed her arms. "Then why does it always fall on me? Who takes care of dinner when you're working late? Who keeps this place from turning into a pigsty? Me. And I've had enough." Her voice cracked a little at the end. She wasn't just lecturing me, she was angry. And it wasn't the usual frustration over a messy room. This was deeper. I tried to lighten the mood with a half-smile. "Are you saying you want me to pay you for cleaning up around here?" She didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. "Actually, yes. That's exactly what I'm saying." I almost choked on my coffee. "Emma, you're joking, right?" She shook her head. "I'm dead serious, Look. If you're going to treat this like a job, then you should pay me for my labor. Otherwise, I'm just your free housekeeper." The room felt suddenly smaller, like the air had thickened. I rubbed the back of my neck, trying to find the right thing to say. I love you. This is our home. We're in this together." She leaned forward. "Then start acting like it. Start showing that you value what I do. Because right now, I don't see it." For a second, I thought maybe she'd calm down. Maybe she just needed to get this off her chest. But she didn't look calmer. She looked even more determined. "Luke," she said, her voice low, "I'm done being the only one who cares about keeping this house running. If you're not going to help, you're going to pay. Period." I stared at her, feeling like I'd just been hit by a truck. This wasn't the woman I married, at least not the way I'd known her. And I realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just a passing phase. This was the new Emma, someone who saw our marriage as a ledger, not a partnership. I forced a nod, trying to keep my own emotions from boiling over. "Okay, let's talk about it later. I've got to get to work." She didn't stop me as I grabbed my keys and left, but I could feel her eyes on my back the whole time. And as I stepped outside, I knew one thing for sure. Everything had just changed. Saturday afternoons were usually my time. I'd play soccer with a group of guys from work, blow off some steam, and forget about code reviews and project deadlines. But this Saturday was different. Emma texted me right as I was lacing up my cleats. "Can you come home? We need to talk about your share of the housework." I stared at the message, feeling my stomach twist. I texted back, "Can it wait? I'm just starting a game." But she didn't answer, and I knew her well enough to understand that meant no. I left the field early, my head buzzing with frustration. When I walked through the front door, she was waiting at the dining table, surrounded by neat stacks of paper. She'd even brought out the calculator. My gut told me this wasn't just a talk, it was an ambush. "Sit," she said, her tone brisk, like she was my manager, not my wife. Saturday, what's going on?" She tapped the table. "I did a little math. A household contribution calculation, if you will." I frowned. "A what?" Emma slid a printed spreadsheet toward me. I looked down at the list, squinting at the tiny font. It was all there. Laundry, meal prep, vacuuming, wiping down the counters. Every task she'd ever done, multiplied by an hourly rate she found online. "I added up everything I do around here," she said, her voice calm and precise. "This is what you owe me. Monthly." I let out a short laugh, hoping she'd crack a smile, but she just stared at me, deadly serious. I ran a hand through my hair, glancing back at the numbers. It was a lot. I said carefully, "You can't seriously expect me to pay you for being my wife." Her mouth tightened. "I'm not your wife. I'm your maid. Or at least that's how you treat me." and I'm done doing it for free. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. Look, you're right. I don't always help out enough. I can do more. But paying you? That's not how marriage works. It's how it's going to work, she said. She folded her arms. Either you start taking on half the work, or you start paying me for what I do. For a moment, I just stared at her, trying to wrap my head around this. My wife was invoicing me. And from the look in her eyes, she wasn't bluffing. All right, I said slowly. If that's what you want, let's do it. She blinked, clearly thrown off by my calm agreement. What do you mean? I mean, if you're treating this like a business transaction, let's make sure the math is accurate. I pushed the spreadsheet back toward her. I'll calculate my share too. All the expenses I cover, the mortgage, the insurance, the car payment, plus what I contribute emotionally, like supporting you when you're stressed, fixing stuff around the house. Let's see how that adds up. For a second, her confidence wavered, but then she straightened her shoulders. Fine. Do your little audit. Oh, I will, I said, and we'll see who owes who by the end of it. I spent the rest of the day in my office, surrounded by piles of statements and receipts. Every bill, every payment. I pulled up our joint account, noted every dollar that left my paycheck to keep us both afloat. I even factored in things like fixing the leaky faucet last month and unclogging the shower drain, stuff that would have cost a fortune if we hired someone else. The numbers painted a clear picture. I wasn't just a freeloader. I was pulling more than my weight. I printed out my findings, a stack of papers as thick as a short novel. When I brought it back to the dining table, Emma was waiting, her arms crossed and her jaw set. What's this? She asked, her voice tight. Reality, I said, sliding the stack toward her. Here's everything I pay for. Here's what you'd owe me if you treated it like a contract. She looked down at the pages, her eyes flicking back and forth. She didn't say anything, but I could see the uncertainty creeping in. For the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't seem so sure of herself. I'm not trying to start a fight, Emma, I said quietly. But you can't just pretend this marriage is a job you're doing alone. I contribute too, maybe not in the ways you think, but it's there. She stayed silent, flipping through the pages. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, she looked up at me, her expression hard to read. This isn't over, she said. I didn't think it would be, I replied. She stood up, the spreadsheet clutched in her hand, and walked away. I watched her go, feeling the weight of what we just started settle over me. It wasn't about the money. Not really. It was about how we saw each other, and for the first time, I wondered if Emma and I were looking at two completely different marriages. The next day, I woke up early, even before my alarm. I couldn't sleep. My head was buzzing with numbers and quiet fury. I decided if Emma was going to treat our marriage like a business deal, I was going to show her exactly how much I'd been carrying. By 8 in the morning, I was hunched over the kitchen table with my laptop, sleeves rolled up. I pulled together everything I could think of: mortgage statements, car insurance, credit card bills, even grocery receipts. I spent hours crafting that spreadsheet, every line item carefully labeled. I wanted there to be no confusion, no wiggle room for debate. Emma walked in around 10, still in her robe, hair tied up in a messy bun. She froze when she saw me at the table, papers and coffee mugs everywhere. Look, what are you doing? She asked. I didn't look up. What you wanted me to do? The audit. She sighed, crossing her arms. I didn't mean for you to take it this far. I shrugged. You wanted to put a price tag on our life together. I'm just following your lead. She didn't say anything else. She just turned and left, her footsteps soft on the carpet. By noon, I had it all laid out in black and white. My spreadsheet was a masterpiece. Every monthly bill, every repair I'd done myself, every time I picked up the tab for a date night or covered the car registration. I even included the hours I spent helping her study when she was going for her promotion, the endless nights of talking through her work stress. It was emotional labor, sure, but if we were doing this by the book, I figured it counted. I printed it out, all 15 pages of it, and slid it into a folder. Then I sat back, feeling something I hadn't felt in days: calm. I had my facts. Now it was her turn to face them. The next morning, I woke up early again. I made breakfast pancakes, her favorite, trying to keep the routine as normal as possible. I wasn't trying to start a fight, even if that's what it felt like. Emma came down in her workout clothes, tying her hair into a ponytail. She looked at the pancakes, then at me, and hesitated. Sit, I said gently. We need to talk. She sat. I pushed the folder across the table. What's this? She asked, her tone guarded. My share of the household contributions, I said. Everything I pay for, everything I fix. Take a look. She opened it and started flipping through. At first, she looked annoyed, like she thought I was being petty. But as she kept turning the pages, her expression changed. Her shoulders stiffened, her mouth tightened. This is a lot, she murmured. It is, I said. And it's what I bring to this marriage. It's not just you doing work around here. She set the folder down, her fingers drumming on the table. Look, this isn't what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I interrupted, my voice steady. You said you wanted me to pay you for the work you do. Fine. But you have to look at what I'm already paying for. What I'm already giving. She swallowed hard. This isn't about money, look. No, I said. Because you sure made it sound like it was. You put a dollar amount on our relationship, Emma. You wanted me to see your worth. So now I'm showing you mine. She looked away, her jaw working. It's different, she said quietly. It's not, I replied. You're treating this like a business arrangement. Like we're coworkers, not partners. She closed the folder and pushed it away. You're twisting this, Luke. You're making me the bad guy. I'm not trying to make you anything, I said. I'm just tired of pretending that what I do doesn't count. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. I can't deal with this right now. I watched her walk away, the silence hanging heavy in the kitchen. I didn't follow her. I didn't try to fix it. For the first time in our marriage, I was done playing the peacemaker. After that breakfast, everything changed. Emma stopped talking about feelings and fairness. She went silent and cold, like she was playing some quiet game I wasn't invited to. But I kept working on my part, updating the spreadsheet like I was running a business, not a marriage. Every day, I logged what I did, washing the dishes, taking out the trash, even little things like replacing the batteries in the smoke detector. I kept the receipts from the store when I grabbed groceries on my way home from work. It felt ridiculous, but it was what she'd asked for. I set up a separate file, household services account. I titled it that in bold letters and printed it out, sticking it to the fridge. Emma barely looked at it, but I knew she saw it every morning when she got her yogurt. She was furious. I could tell from the way she'd slam the cabinet shut and how she'd roll her eyes whenever I logged another entry. But she didn't argue. She just dug her heels in deeper, determined not to be the first one to crack. A week later, she stopped doing anything around the house. No more laundry, no more cooking. The sink started to fill with dishes, and I swear I could smell the garbage every time I walked in the door. I didn't say a word. I just added the cost of hiring someone to clean it all up to the spreadsheet. One night, after I came home from work and found her curled up on the couch scrolling on her phone, I asked, "So, what's the plan here, Emma?" She didn't even look up. "What do you mean?" "You stopped doing anything," I said. "I just want to know if I should hire a cleaner or if you're planning to pitch in again." She set her phone down slowly, glaring at me. "Are you serious?" I crossed my arms. "I'm completely serious. You said this was about compensation, right? So if you're not going to do it, I'm hiring help. And that's coming out of your share too." She scoffed, standing up. "You're treating this like a joke. Look, I'm treating it exactly how you wanted it," I said. "If this is a business deal, then fine. But I'm not going to be the only one putting in work." She stormed off, muttering under her breath. That night, she slept in the guest room. I lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how we'd gotten here. The next day, she didn't cook dinner. So I ordered takeout for myself and left her to figure out her own meal. When she asked where hers was, I just shrugged. "It's not in the budget," I said flatly. Every day felt colder. Every conversation was clipped, transactional. The home we built together felt like an office where no one wanted to be. The worst part was how normal it started to feel. Like we were two roommates splitting rent, not a married couple. Even the little things, like the way she used to hum while doing dishes, were gone. She'd turned off the part of her that had made this house feel like home. But I didn't back down. I kept tracking everything, every dollar, every minute spent keeping this place running. It wasn't about proving her wrong anymore. It was about surviving this mess without losing myself. One night, she came into the kitchen while I was updating the spreadsheet. She looked tired, her shoulders hunched. "Luke," she said quietly, "this isn't working." I looked up at her. "You think I don't know that?" She sighed. I didn't think it would go this far." "You set the rules," I said. "I'm just following them." She pressed her lips together, then turned and left without another word. I closed the laptop, my hand resting on the spreadsheet. I didn't know if we could fix this. I wasn't sure if either of us even wanted to. A couple weeks later, Emma decided she'd had enough. She packed a couple of suitcases and moved out to her sister's apartment across town. She didn't slam the door or yell, she just left, like she was going on vacation. And I let her. The first night she was gone, I didn't sleep. The house was too quiet without her footsteps and soft voice, even if lately those sounds had been edged with tension. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. The next morning, I made coffee and checked my phone. There was a message from Emma. "I need time to think. Please don't call me." I didn't reply. There wasn't anything left to say. She stayed with her sister, a one-bedroom place over in Willow Park. I heard about it in bits and pieces from mutual friends, how Emma was sleeping on the couch, how she'd started helping her sister with errands to pay her way. I could picture it easily, Emma trying to turn her independence into proof she'd been right all along. A few days later, I started getting these short, cold texts from her. Updates as if she were reporting to a boss. "I'm covering my own rent now. I'm buying my own groceries. I don't need your help. I read them and didn't respond. But each time, I felt this strange mix of relief and sadness. Like I wanted to believe she really was okay out there on her own, but I also knew what independence really costs. Because while she was gone, I noticed how much easier my own life became. The house stayed clean because I was the only one living in it. My grocery bill dropped. My mood evened out. Without her constant scorekeeping, I started to feel like myself again. I knew she noticed it, too. She'd stopped by one afternoon to grab a few more things, her makeup bag, a box of old photos. She didn't say much, just glanced around the tidy living room with this pinched look on her face. "You're saving a lot of money with me gone, aren't you?" she said. I shrugged. "You wanted to be on your own, Emma." She pressed her lips together, eyes shining like she might cry. But she didn't. She just nodded and left without another word. Meanwhile, her sister started calling me. Lauren wasn't cruel, but she didn't mince words, either. "Luke, I think Emma's realizing this is harder than she expected," she said one evening when I picked up her call. She thought she could just step out and everything would be fine. But real life doesn't work like that. I let out a tired sigh. She made her choice. I know. But she's seeing it now. Rent. Groceries. All the little things she didn't think about before. Lauren paused. "She misses the comfort she had with you. But she's too proud to admit it." I didn't say anything. Because what was there to say? Emma had wanted to prove she was more than just a caretaker. But now she was learning that real independence meant more than demanding payment. It meant shouldering every burden, every bill, every lonely dinner alone. A few days later, Emma texted again. This time it was longer. "I know you're saving money with me gone. I just hope you don't think that means I didn't do anything here. I worked hard to keep our home together. I just didn't want to be taken for granted." I read the message over and over, my heart heavy. Because I did understand. But I also knew that partnership wasn't supposed to feel like an invoice. So I texted back. "I never took you for granted. But you turned this into a transaction, not me." She didn't reply. That weekend, I went to the farmer's market like I always did. I picked up fresh bread, some local honey, a couple of apples. It was quiet, peaceful. No spreadsheets, no arguments, no moral accounting. And as I walked back to my car under the June sun, I realized I wasn't lonely. I was free. Emma came back about 2 months later. It wasn't dramatic, no suitcase in the rain or tearful reunion. She just texted me one evening. "Can I come by? I need to talk." I told her she could. And when she showed up at the door, she looked different. Less sure of herself. She stood there, shoulders hunched, her eyes darting around like she wasn't sure if she should be here. I stepped aside to let her in. Hey, she said, her voice small. We sat down in the living room. She didn't look at me right away. She stared at her hands, picking at her cuticles the way she did when she was nervous. "I've been thinking a lot," she started. "About everything." I didn't say anything. I just waited. Emma took a deep breath. "I think I let some people get in my head. People at the workshop, the blogs I was reading. They made it sound like marriage was just a job. And if I wasn't getting paid for it, I was getting used." I nodded slowly. "You've been reading that stuff for months." "Yeah," she said quietly. "I thought I was empowering myself, you know? Like I was finally seeing how unfair it all was. But then, when I was living with Lauren, I realized something. Being on your own isn't just about freedom. It's about responsibility. About taking care of things because they matter to you, not because you're owed for it." I watched her, trying to see if this was just another phase. But her eyes were clear. Tired, but clear. "I'm not saying I was wrong to want more help," she continued. "But I turned it into a business deal. And that's not what marriage is. It's not about debts and ledgers." She paused, swallowing hard. "I lost sight of what we had, Luke. And I'm sorry." For a moment, I just sat there, letting the apology sink in. I'd waited a long time to hear her say those words. And as much as I wanted to jump up and forgive her, I couldn't. "Emma," I said quietly, "I appreciate you saying that. But you broke something in us when you started treating this marriage like a contract. I can't just pretend it didn't happen." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know. I don't expect you to. I want to earn back your trust. If you'll let me." I leaned back in my chair, thinking, we're not going back to how things were. If you want this to work, we have to set new terms. Terms that aren't about money or chores, terms about respect. About being partners, not enemies. "I understand," she said, her voice trembling. I stood and walked to the kitchen, pulling out a piece of paper. I scribbled down a simple agreement, nothing formal, just a promise to each other. No more treating each other like employees. No more keeping score. Just two people who love each other and are willing to do the work to prove it. I handed it to her. She read it carefully, her fingers tracing the words. Then she signed her name at the bottom, her signature shaky. When she looked up at me, there was a softness in her expression I hadn't seen in months. "I want this," she said simply. "I want us." "I do too," I said. She stayed that night, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt like home again. She didn't try to fix everything with a smile or a sweet word. She just started doing the small things, picking up her coffee cup, folding the laundry without being asked. Every time she did, it was like she was telling me, "I'm here. I'm trying." And for the first time in months, I believed her. The weeks after Emma moved back in were strange. We were both careful with each other, like we were walking on thin ice. But it wasn't the cold silence we'd lived in before, it was something else. A cautious warmth, maybe. Like we both knew how fragile trust could be, and neither of us wanted to break it again. Emma started showing gratitude for the little things. "When I fixed the leaky faucet," she said, "Thank you, Luke," and her voice was soft, honest. When I cooked dinner, she'd clear the table without being asked, and she'd look at me over the plates, her eyes saying more than words ever could. She stopped reading the blogs that had turned everything in our life into a transaction. Instead, she started reading about partnership, real partnership. We'd sit together on the couch in the evenings, talking about how to make things work instead of who owed what. She'd say, "I want to be your partner, not your accountant," and I'd nod, because that was what I'd always wanted too. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old habits tried to creep back in. Like when I came home late one night after a rough day at work, and she made a face at my muddy boots in the hallway. But instead of saying something sarcastic, she just handed me a towel. "Here, let's not make a mess," she said lightly. I took the towel and cleaned up, and it felt right. Like we found a way to be on the same team again. Our conversations changed too. We stopped talking about who was doing more and started talking about what we wanted for the future. One night, she said, "I know now that I let those voices get to me. They made me think that love wasn't enough. But I see it differently now." "How?" I asked, genuinely curious. She leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her tea mug. "I see that love isn't a checklist. It's about how we show up for each other when no one's keeping score." I reached across the table and took her hand. That's all I've ever wanted. Emma's social circle started to change too. She used to have these friends who'd egg her on, telling her to demand more, to never settle. She stopped seeing them. She told me one night, they love the drama. It made them feel important. But that's not what I want anymore. Instead, she spent more time with people who talked about working together, about lifting each other up. And I could see how much lighter she felt because of it. I watched her do the dishes one night, the warm light from the kitchen window catching in her hair. She looked over at me and smiled, just a small, genuine smile. And in that moment, I realized how far we'd come. The cold accounting of our marriage had turned into something real again. A quiet understanding that life wasn't about who did the most or who deserved more. It was about being in it together, day by day, without a running tally. When we went to bed that night, she curled up against me and said, "I'm grateful for you, look, for everything you do." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'm grateful for you too." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying all the weight. I felt like I had someone next to me, ready to share the load. Life settled into a quiet rhythm after that. We were back to sharing chores and making each other laugh over silly things, like how Emma would always forget to turn off the bathroom light, or how I'd leave the milk on the counter and she'd catch it before it spoiled. It felt normal again. It felt good. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got the call. My manager's voice was tight, apologetic. "Look, I'm sorry, but the project's over. We're downsizing, and, well, today's your last day." I sat there in my car after that call, staring at the steering wheel. My hands felt numb. My job wasn't just work, it was security, my way of taking care of Emma, of keeping our life steady. And in one phone call, it was gone. When I walked through the door, Emma was in the kitchen chopping vegetables. She looked up at my face, and I didn't even have to say it. She set the knife down and came over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. I let out a shaky breath. "I'll figure it out. I'll find something else." She pulled back just enough to look me in the eyes. "I know you will. And I'm here to help, however I can." True to her word, Emma stepped up immediately. She took over the household chores without saying a word about it, like she'd always been the one to handle them. She even picked up extra hours at the bookstore she worked at part-time, and when I told her she didn't have to, she just smiled. "This is what partners do," she said. "You've always been there for me. Now it's my turn." Those first few weeks were rough. Every job application felt like shouting into the void. Every time I opened my laptop to tweak my resume again, I felt a little more like I was failing. But Emma never let me feel that way for long. She'd make me coffee or slip a note into my jacket pocket. "You're strong. You're smart. I believe in you." One night, when I was feeling especially low, she sat me down and said, "I know you're worried. I know you feel like you're not doing enough. But I need you to hear me. You are enough. No matter what." I looked at her across the table, the flickering candlelight catching her eyes. I thought about all the times I'd felt like I was the only one keeping us afloat, and how wrong I'd been. She was my partner, not my employee. And this, her quiet faith in me, meant more than any paycheck. A month later, I finally got an offer. A software startup in Denver. It wasn't as much money as my old job, but it was a fresh start. When I got the call, Emma was the first person I told. She squealed and threw her arms around me, her laughter echoing in the little kitchen. "I'm so proud of you," she said, kissing my cheek. As I settled into the new job, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. It was about how we showed up for each other when life threw us a curveball. It was about how Emma had proven, without words, that partnership was about standing together, not keeping a ledger. One evening, after dinner, I looked across the table at her and said, "I think we're finally getting it." She tilted her head. "Getting what?" "Marriage," I said simply. "It's not about who does what, or who pays for what. It's about taking care of each other. About investing in us." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft and sure. "I think we're finally getting it." And in that moment, I knew we weren't the same couple we'd been when this all started. We'd torn down the old, broken foundation and built something new. Something stronger. Something real. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we could handle anything together.